I believe that these agencies probably had very thorough disaster recovery and business continuity uh, plans in place. It's just whether or not they'll be allowed to execute. I don't know.
My optimism was just crushed. Made Daily. Hello and welcome to the Made Daily podcast. I'm John Michael Thomas.
I'm Pierre Hegeman.
Made Daily covers our favorite online stories from tech to social media,
Our expert thoughts and opinions about information security, website design, and development,
and other random stories from across the internet. This week's episode of the Made Daily podcast is brought to you by Cinemechanics, the premier camera and lens rental house. When you're shooting your next film, feature film in Minnesota, commercial or popular streaming platform, television series, Cinemechanics will ensure your project stays next level.
I've made Daily version 5, the all-in-one secure website builder with built-in data collection tools and secure customer portals.
And one of our way back internet favorites, the $1 Million homepage. But first, we're going to talk about this article that I came across on the foreignpolicy.com, and it's been other places too. DOGE is hacking America. And I guess the real question is DOGE hacking America? Is this actually happening? Or are we just being alarmists? First off, what is DOGE? If you don't know what DOGE is, it's this new Department of Government Efficiency run by Elon Musk. DOGE is also a meme coin, as you know, based off the dog. And it was an internet meme from 2013 and consists of a picture of the Shiba Inu dog, which also happens to be a coin. So it's sort of silly that we're having this conversation about memes and trolling, and we need to really discuss, is America being trolled?
Well, I don't know if trolled is the right word, but I think there's some just so whether or not this is warranted or a good thing or a bad thing, I think it's impossible to argue that the security systems of the federal government have not failed.
Okay,
right?
so let me back us up for 1 sec and let you dive into that. So DOGE has been going into various government entities, right? So they've been going into everything. They're in the Department of Education. They're also in the Treasury Department. And these are a group that's been assigned by the White House to go in and investigate and look at ways to make government more efficient. That's their kind of mandate. But as people made daily that considers, protecting personal identifiable information, this had our alarm bells ringing and Pierre's brain maybe exploding even because this is could be really very concerning. And we're not trying to be alarmist, but this is concerning to us. And Pierre, explain
I think we can be alarmist. I think it's okay, because so kind of what's going on, right? The U.S. government is facing a major security crisis, right? And not even the usual ones from China and North Korea that we're always facing, but this one is new because it's coming from inside. And a lot of organizations have trouble dealing with attackers from the inside, and the U.S. government is no different. So
can you for people who don't know, and I might ask you a couple questions on this one, can you just explain what you mean by explain what the security crisis is?
Well, we'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
So basically what's happening is personnel from this Department of Government Efficiency, which wasn't officially created by Congress, right? It was created by the White House, by the administration, and with very little oversight, no oversight as far as I know, from any of the normal kind of watchdog groups.
They are watching themselves.
They're right. So, and they're systematically going into critical government systems, like such as the Treasury, the Center for Information Security, and they're gaining access to critical systems, to sensitive information, and they're able to reportedly, I don't have firsthand, I'm not a witness to this, but reportedly they're able to install equipment and make copies of data and update systems. So from a security perspective, it's mind-blowingly bad. Right? If you were to talk to any bank, any large retail office, any private company with a good sense of security, go to their security team and say, I'm going to bring in an outside group with no oversight and allow them to start copying production databases and installing their own equipment on sensitive management networks, the security team would throw you out the door,
right.
while telling you that you're completely crazy.
Right. Now, they've said they have read-only access, but again, we're trusting them. Like, the trust we're putting in DOGE to protect us is, from my point of view, just insane. That's like you've worked at, banks. We worked at Target Corp. This would be like if we just waltzed into Target Corp, got into the mainframe, plugged a hard drive in, and just started like doing whatever we wanted.
Right. Yeah. So just as an example, it's hard to explain how difficult it is to access the mainframe, like the core computer systems, the mainframes at a large bank. They're often in isolated buildings that aren't marked. They are in a basement behind a secured elevator. There is what's called a man trap. So there's a door. You scan your badge to get in the door. You stand inside, and then there's a system. Typically, it will take some sort of biometrics. It might take your weight. It might scan you, and then you scan your badge again to get into the second door. And the reason why it does that is to make sure you don't bring anything out with you, right? And then it almost always, to access or make any changes to these systems, almost always requires at least two people, right, with access to be able to go in and make the change. And there's a reason for that. It's called separation of duties. And that's a security control that you put in place to make sure that highly critical systems can't be compromised by a single person. And all of that has gone out the window. There is no, there's these controls that have a purpose have just been tossed out the window. And as a security professional, it's really the ease with which all this happened is terrifying to me, because who's to say that it hasn't happened before? I think
right. Who's to say that a foreign government hasn't done this before?
Right. And what's worse, right, is, and we can talk about some of the risks that are that this presents, but I think the biggest issue is not just that these systems have been accessed, not just that equipment has potentially been installed on the network, but it's the systematic dismantling. And this actually kind of is almost a quote from the article, which was written by Bruce Schneier, who's a really well-known security expert. But the systematic dismantling of the security controls that detect and prevent misuse inside these government agencies and inside these critical systems is being disassembled, right? That's being destroyed. The protocols for responding to incidents, for auditing changes, change tracking management, it's all going out the window because the people in charge of those systems are being removed and they're being replaced by unvetted, possibly inexperienced, we don't even know who they are, right?
And I would I'd like to talk about this a slightly different way, because we've had personal experiences dealing with going and working at companies where a new CEO gets hired and the organization goes through all kinds of restructuring, right?
Yep.
A
Happens
lot
all
of
the
times
time.
what gets, and it's fine, there people got to make cuts, whole divisions have just been slashed and gone and all that. But what what people sometimes forget is that there's been all kinds of processes and procedures that have been developed over multiple years and refined. And these processes are to help so that, a lot of times, and Pierre, you've talked to this on the pod a lot, uh, breaches happen because one guy's in charge of everything, and
Mm.
there's not redundancies. There's not procedures in place. So if Bill's not at the office and something's happening, or Bill didn't do the thing, or something happens to Bill, there could be it's a weak point, right?
Yeah.
To some degree.
I think that's mostly right. I think what I think it would say it's more accurate to say that a breach, an internal breach, right, an
Right.
inside breach will happen when um, people have too much access, when a single person has too much
Sure.
access. So say you go in as a systems administrator, and you're granted access to the deployment environment, the production, right, or database. You're a DBA, right, and then you get promoted to a manager, and maybe if the company doesn't have good security hygiene and they're not removing unneeded access, then it's you get privilege creep, and so you get more and more access to more and more systems until you become so powerful you can make unilateral changes to sensitive systems. And so one of the kind of tenets of good security in a large organization is reviewing access and making sure, does this person still need access to these
Mhm.
systems? If not, we'll take it away.
Right. And there's also, I think, a trust with who gets access. And typically there are some procedures or some classes you've gone through to understand. I mean, shoot, I did even just training I've had to do for past jobs about how to protect IP of the organization. You got 15 different modules, that are all these requirements you have to go through. Fine, but when you let a outside entity just sort of swoop in, and they're not beholden to any of that, it is alarming, because maybe nothing will happen, but what if something were to happen?
I
What could happen? And now I would say, from what I know from you, Pierre, is like, now we're compromised, and we don't know what, like, to your point and to the end of the article here, what's to come.
Yeah, I think the risk is so high that we should just assume that um, you, that something bad is going to happen. The likelihood is so incredibly high that it's almost impossible that it's not going to happen, right? And with these security controls essentially destroyed, that leaves this is also in the article, that leaves an opening for true external attackers, say China, Russia, North Korea,
Mhm.
to get in and exploit these systems as well. And when we're talking about things like the Treasury, which issues all of the payments for all of the government, trillions and trillions of dollars worth of money being transferred, when you're talking about you know removing security controls from that kind of a system, the consequences will be catastrophic.
And we don't, like you said, we don't really know. We don't know the magnitude of this. We don't know if those security controls are totally out of the water. But let's go back down the summary of what's been happening, because I think there's a couple points here. The U.S. government has already faced major security crisis due to foreign hackers. Um, but
I mean, that's kind of a constant
right, right.
constant threat. Yeah.
But now we've got an internal agency kind of acting as a hacking group. Well, they're trying to say we're trying to do something good and we're trying to be more efficient. I think any organization would not allow this to happen.
Right.
A bank would not allow this to happen. This would be a 5-alarm fire inside a bank. This would be a
Absolutely.
5-alarm fire at Best Buy. This would be like people would be getting canned right now.
Right. I mean, what we're talking about is unauthorized personnel from this Department of Government Efficiency accessing sensitive government databases, treasury records, things like CIA personnel files, which, that's about as classified
That's spies.
spies.
That's people who are
classified.
embedded to getting us deep intelligence within
Right.
other governments. It's
Right.
like sanity.
I mean, there might be data that's more highly classified than that, but I don't know what it would be, because I don't have the security access to that. And the problem is these people don't either. They haven't gone through the security clearance to be able to access that information, and they're accessing it anyway, which is the definition of a data breach.
And
right?
they haven't, and they're not civil servants. They're not military. They have not sworn an oath to the Constitution. They're literally like the Office Space team that comes in the Office Space movie and just says, "Well, what do you do here? Oh, I don't like you. I don't like how you look. You're out of here." It's kind of wild. It's so wild.
Yeah.
I mean, and then did you mention the Medicare, Medicaid standard safeguards?
Well, we talked about the separation of duties, how the incident monitoring, these controls are either being ignored completely or actively removed, and so I think the damage that's being caused is to such a degree that we have to assume that these systems are entirely compromised and will need to be rebuilt from the ground up.
Why would you assume that?
Because if you as a security professional, when I go into an incident, if I cannot gauge the magnitude of the breach, if I can't say here are the boundaries of what has been compromised, I have to assume that everything is compromised. And if everything is compromised, then the only solution is to remove it all and rebuild it from scratch. Right. Because you'll never know if you got. Right. It's kind of like removing cancer, right? If you're not sure that you got it all, it's coming back.
Right. Or a threat of a shooter in a location. The only way they can make sure it's clear, they got to go room by room. Yeah. And inspect every ounce, every attic, everywhere. Right. And then the other thing that I thought that made me definitely queasy was, have they been training AI on the data that they have access to?
Reportedly, yeah. I think the report that I saw was Department of Education data was being used to train AI. And we've talked about AI a few times on our podcast. And,
why do you need to train AI on let's just kind of break this down for people. Like what do you gain from training AI on a bunch of data from the Department of Education?
What AI is in this context would be really good for is surveillance. Right. And I don't know. I think that it's.
So I kind of feel like we definitely should go back and look back to our older podcasts of how to freeze your credit. I think that is something I'm going to go double check and make sure that everything's frozen. I personally will probably do a little bit of digging into the financial institutions I use, make sure everything's two-factored up, make sure I'm using the right security protocols to get into stuff. We've also talked about, looking at a credit union, because they're typically a little bit more safer than just a regular bank. And What's the other one?
especially
Forgot.
with the FDIC being
Right.
shuttered. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that's not. Yeah, going with a credit union is actually
Yeah.
probably a really good idea.
Yeah.
I would say, I personally am going to try to get my taxes done as soon as possible this year,
Hmm.
because with the Treasury Department in the state that it's in, I wonder about refund payments. I have no evidence to say that refunds aren't going to get paid, right? I don't know, but I have a concern about it.
I mean, there definitely could be a delay. Definitely could be an issue. And also, that's just kind of par for the course when you're just going in and just slashing like the workforce because you're trying to find places to cut. And we've seen this just firsthand in our years of doing stuff where we've had to like get the emergency phone call to get into an organization and help them get something that they didn't think through, that they eliminated, and now it's a big pain,
Yeah,
you
and
know.
and we like to iterate. We like to be, um, you know, innovative, and there is a place for, let's just try something and see how it works, right? You know, but when you're talking about the systems that form the basis of our economy for the entire country, and that by extension of the world, I think move fast and break things is not the right attitude. Right? You want to be
Well, I mean,
conservative when you're dealing with
yeah,
the treasury.
and that's another thing we could talk to a little bit. There's definitely, we've kind of entered into a world where the startup CEO is sort of like, the hottest thing to be. And um you know there's some philosophy that one might say, uh there's other cultures like Japan and things that might say, well, maybe a slower way is the better way. So there's, you can have that debate all day long. uh but they're sort of like, hey, we're innovating, we're disrupting, we're gonna shake things up. That's sort of been something that we've propped up in America as being like a thing that we need to do. Great. It's wonderful to innovate, it's wonderful to be disruptive. We've had some really unique things happen in the last even 20 years, technology that's came out. You could say Steve Jobs was a disruptor, and creating an iPhone and things. And there's been other things. There's been other good things. But then you also have the fact that this is government,
Yeah,
and it's protecting people and people's rights.
right.
And when you're running an organization, people and people's rights really aren't on your, I wouldn't say they're not on the top of the priority list. It's about protecting the company and making the company profitable. And so it's, you're at an instant like clash within your own uh, uh um you're a contradiction right
Yeah,
away, and it's very different. And the thing that's dangerous about this stuff, and Pierre, I'll let you get in on here, is just like there could be really serious consequences to individual people. And we can debate, about, we can debate all day politically about, our points of view, but this could be, people could feel a lot of pain from some of
absolutely.
this stuff
And
happening.
the other thing that I think it's a fundamental flaw to compare the functioning of the government to the functioning of a business. The government, the role of the government is to serve the people, is to protect the people, is to serve the interests of the country, not necessarily to make a profit, right? The government does not need to be profitable. Um, it can't really, because the government doesn't have revenue streams except for taxes, right? When we're talking about these systems, like the Treasury is not just you know um, it's not just making payments to states. It's military pay, right? If that goes offline, I don't think anybody could argue a soldier not getting paid is that would not be a national security issue, right? Well, like these systems these systems cannot be allowed to go down.
Well,
And
I mean, FAA, if we've already experienced this
yeah,
recently, there, understaffing on a control tower at an airport, and
yeah.
bad things can happen.
Yeah, and we can have discussions, we can have disagreements, we can have arguments over um, government uh, government in general, and these agencies, and are they needed? Are they doing what they should be doing? Like there's legitimate ground for discussion there, but there are already um, there are procedures in place for doing that, right? We have Congress, we have the courts, and those are the ways that we have established to determine, is this agency doing what it should be doing? Is this
Mhm.
agency needed? And the fact that somebody who hasn't been elected and hasn't been vetted and or authorized by anyone but themselves can come in and say, no, this is not right, I'm going to shut it down, is a major problem.
Yeah.
And aside from the security implications, there are systems we've set up for handling these disagreements, and they're not being used.
Yeah.
They're being ignored.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to what you were saying about the government doesn't have to be profitable, point of view, and I think some would argue uh, they like the approach of a business person coming in and cleaning house and shutting down things and making everything better. Sure, I think there's a principle thing there, and I do think that there are probably things where if I knew more about all the different government agencies, I could point to things that are probably inefficient, as well. But there's also the other thing of like, you know, it's about figuring out how to have a balance because we're running this giant deficit. We're not collecting enough money to offset that deficit, but the states have been able to figure it out. We had a surplus in Minnesota here forever. We've collected more revenues than we spent, and that's actually worked out well for us. Now, people were always going to have the debate. Well, we have to pay too much taxes, sure, but let's have that debate and like work through ways to solve it for everybody. And I just feel like we don't get beyond your way is wrong, my way is right. And I think as creative professionals and like the work that we do, we're always dealing in the middle and the nuances and trying to figure out a way to solve a problem. We can hit a wall and we go, okay, we got to rethink this. How are we going to execute on this? And I think that's kind of where maybe that's somewhere we can leave from some of this is a serious situation, but maybe it's something that ultimately people can start to like pay a little bit more attention, and we can hopefully we'll get through this, and it's not going to be the catastrophe and all the alarms that the alarm bells we're hearing right now. I don't know, you know.
I mean, from my perspective, from a security perspective, I think the damage is already done.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a way to really come back from this. So we have to assume that these systems are compromised, and then so we're no longer in. This isn't a preventative situation. We're now in incident response, right? How do
Mm,
we contain the damage? How do we um, and disaster recovery, right?
mm,
Business continuity. How do we recover from this? Can we get these systems
mm.
back to the state they were in before? Is that even possible? And so I believe that these agencies probably had very thorough disaster recovery and business continuity plans in place. It's just whether or not they'll be allowed to execute.
Hmm.
I don't know.
My optimism was just crushed. So, I mean, Yeah. I mean, we already know that the telecoms have been compromised. We talked about that. We already know that people have been in the power grid. Um, and like that's like when you start going down those paths, that's like disaster movie. Like that would never happen. But we just let our own government be infiltrated
Yeah.
and by basically hackers. And it's just everybody's like, great, wonderful. Hey, we're just calling a spade a spade. Everybody in Doge could have the best intentions and maybe do everything to protecting our data, but when you just look at who walked in the front door, I think if you were protecting anything, you're like, how do those guys get in here?
Well,
You'd be wondering that would be a fair question to
right.
ask.
The problem is that we don't know what their intentions are because they never went through a vetting process. They never went through a clearance process, right? They were never authorized. So we don't know anything about them. And that is the problem. We can't say they have good intentions or bad intentions because we don't know.
Yeah. And maybe that's something for this episode. People could let us know what they think in the comments. We're giving you our opinion. Um, I think that we all kind of want whomever is elected to help us, to help out the country. That's what everybody says they're trying to do. But I think, we're also looking at it through a lens of a little bit different perspective, I guess. And that's where you can tell us, is this a real thing or are we just being alarmists?
Well, every security expert I've seen writing about this is alarmed.
Yeah.
And so take that as you will.
Okay, let's move on to our way back element. This one goes back to 2005. So, geez, long time ago. And
20 years even.
20 years, exactly. Yep. And I remember seeing this and I thought, dang, what a smart idea. So this guy, Alex Tu, a student from England, launched $1 million homepage and basically auctioned off pixels of 1 million pixels on the website. And it went crazy and inspired a bunch of copycats. And I think it says like the last 1,000 pixels were auctioned on eBay. And the winning bid reached 38,100, pushing total earnings over $1,037,000. And I'm sure his internet costs were pretty low, so he probably did okay on this deal. But it's still up, and it's still there. If you're going to it, be very careful clicking around because you don't know what you're going to do. Pierre would probably say, "Don't click any links."
Don't click anything.
But I looked at it, and a lot of it's just like, register this domain. A lot of the companies are gone. But it was kind of funny, and I wonder if someone could like redo this. Like they bring back these shows all the time. Like they're talking about making St. Elmo's Fire Part 2 from years ago. Maybe Alex should do Millionaire homepage, the blockchain version or something. There's also that guy. Remember that guy who tattooed he had the domain name tattooed on his forehead? Remember that guy?
Yeah.
Oh, well, thanks for joining us today. And if you want to check out the stories or topics we covered, please head over to maydaily.com/blog. And if you have a story you'd like to share or a site you'd like reviewed, leave us a comment. We haven't done a review in a while. Yeah, we got to do one of those.
Don't forget to subscribe. Click the button. It's right there. Okay.
And turn on alerts so you can catch the latest and greatest. And follow us on we're on pretty much all socials. And we'll see you next time. Until then,
stay secure.
Made daily.